Hi, everybody. It is Monday, 7 p.m. That means it's time for Career Catalyst Live. Last week, we didn't get to do our live because I was not feeling well. I could hardly talk, but today I'm better. I can talk. I'll put some coughs in there, but I'm here because when I was thinking about this topic, quite frankly, I was like, I shouldn't say that, especially not with this wording. Why most resume advice is trash. But if I'm being honest, that's how I talk, and that is really what I think half the time when I'm looking at resume advice online. So it only felt right that I be myself with y'all, right? I can be myself, right? If you don't know who I am, I'm Angela M. Zachary, the owner of the Inside Track Career Services, and I help job seekers simplify their job searches using little known HR strategies. I'm a 16-year HR vet, and I take those strategies and those systems that I learn, that I create, that I help leaders implement to help you move through your job search and, frankly, through your career in a more seamless way. So today's Career Catalyst Live topic, as I said, is why most resume advice is trash. And I know most is a generalization, right? I'm a word person, so it's a generalization. But I genuinely think that most of the resume advice that you get in mass is trash. And there are reasons for that. I'm going to tell you what they are. But it's one of the reasons why I kind of ended up working in the resume and job search space is because a lot of what people come to me with saying, oh, such and such said I should do this. And this is before I even started my business. But they say, they tell me about the advice that they'd heard online. And I'm like, oh, no, that's awful advice. I recall once seeing somebody repost some resume advice, and the person said, as an HR expert, I say you should do X, Y, and Z. And because I like to investigate the source of advice, I looked them up. And this person, the HR expert, had a total of 2 months of HR experience um, and not even current. So that means that they lasted 2 months in HR and then left to move on to something else. And so the reason why I say most resume advice is trash is because a lot of people are giving advice based on what they might have seen somebody else say. There's a lot of regurgitated advice out there. Some people are saying things based on, excuse me, what has worked for them one time, even though it's not something that they could replicate, right? And so a lot of the times what you end up with is resume advice that looks right because everybody's saying it, but that doesn't mean that it's useful or that it helps in your context, right? I say all the time, context matters when it comes to resumes because without that context, it's just a piece of paper, right? And so a lot of that advice is not contextualized. And so it's generic, it's general, and for the most part, it does not help. So, and I will say for some of it helps some people. Like if you did not know not to put your social security number on there, well, boom, it helped because don't do that. But when it comes down to being able to make empowered decisions, no. So first reason why most resume advice that you're going to see is trash. People teach you to learn by rote instead of by thinking critically and independently. And I kind of just touched on it a minute ago. So learning by rote is something that you did in elementary school. Like the teacher would teach you AT. And every time you saw at, you knew it meant AT. That didn't mean that you stopped to think about why those sounds together make AT or why if you add an E on the end, it's eight. They just said AT equals eight, equals at. And so that's what a lot of resume writers do. They teach you, okay, you put your skills right here because that's where skills belong. And you capitalize your job title because that's what you do with job titles. They don't tell you the why behind it or why in certain situations that might not be the case for you. You might need to do something different. These like stop putting these four things on your resume. So like I said, social security numbers. Yes, there are people who say don't do that. Don't put your home address on there. Okay, don't do that. Don't put a photo. Don't put references available upon request. Like these are things that you could Google. You don't need to pay somebody to write your resume, or you don't need to follow someone. You could Google that. what goes on a resume, and you will find that none of those things go on your resume. But that is what a lot of um, people say as their advice. And the way, so I have an interesting view on advice, right? If it's not useful, again, if it is not contextualized for me, I throw it away. So someone telling you don't put your uh, references on your resume, that's not advice. If you're here, say hello so I know you're watching. Um, that's not advice. That's just stuff. Like that's not something that's going to move the needle. If a recruiter sees that, oh, this person doesn't have their address on here, they must be a good candidate because they didn't put their address. No, that information does not move the needle in any way for you when it comes to your job search. But that is what a lot of um, people advise, even to the point where they say quantify everything. Okay, how? How do I quantify my job when I'm not in a role that they give me numbers for? So, say I'm not in sales, I don't know what my quota is, and I don't know how far I am from it. Um, Maybe I'm in customer service, but I don't see the details about my numbers. They said quantify it, but they did not tell you how to quantify it. They didn't tell you what it means for you to quantify it. And so you're busy trying to find some numbers, make up numbers, as many of them do, make up numbers just to have numbers on the page. But that doesn't help you. Lying on your resume never helps you. But more importantly, when it comes time to speak on those numbers, you won't be able to because you don't fully trust them yourself. So that's the first reason, not the main reason, but the first reason why this resume advice is not good. Secondly, they act like ATS is the highest barrier to entry. I'm tired of people treating ATS like it's Judge Dredd. It is not. It is not the Terminator. It is not a walking, like it's not doing anything but following directions. Okay. ATS is doing what someone told it to do, just like your computer, just like your bank account, just like anything that requires user entry to give an output. They're entering what they want to see, and the system is giving them a result. That's what ATS is doing. It is not the highest barrier to entry. And in fact, when you understand what it is, you don't have to focus on it as much. But for a lot of folks who give resume advice, that's what they focus on. Oh, it's got to be ATS friendly. Resumes are not ATS friendly. Either you answer the questions that it asks or you don't. Um, ATS compliant, ATS is not a law, it's not a regulation, it's a system. So if it can't understand what you've entered, you just adjust the way you enter it, or you enter it somewhere else in the system, like I always teach. But it's not the highest barrier to entry. The highest barrier to entry is those qualifications and the people who assess them. That's the highest barrier to entry. But ATS, it sells, so they talk about it all the time. But I'll be honest, like if ATS started hiring people, we have way more problems than resumes. When that becomes the case, we got bigger fish to fry. But ATS today is not your biggest problem when it comes to your job search or to your resume. Okay. And lastly, they don't teach you about the mechanisms that move your application along when your presentation is strong. So what I mean by that is um, outside of that job description, or maybe I should say within that job description, there is a myriad of stuff going on in the organization. There's compensation, there's internal employees, there's internal applicants. There are job structures and career ladders. There are competitors. There's so much that goes on to create that job that you want to apply for. And those are the mechanisms that move you along in the process. And so if you do not touch on each of these things in a way that the job description will reveal to you, or research in the organization will reveal to you, then no, you won't move along in the process. It doesn't matter how many years of experience you have. I saw somebody today said, I have 20 years of experience. You're telling me that my resume and my LinkedIn profile have to be strong, like my experience doesn't speak for itself. Experience doesn't speak unless you tell it what to say, right? If I just said, "Oh, I worked in HR for 16 years," okay, but would they know that I have developed these career structures for half of that time? No, and I even have more than half of that time. They wouldn't know that because I didn't say it, right? But if you're not working to move those structures along to get those cogs in the process to move in your on your behalf, then yeah, your resume is just a piece of paper. You've got to appeal to several people along the process. Yes, you've got to respond to questions in a way that dings their radar. Um, and even beyond that, if you get the job, there's even more parts of this system that you have to satisfy in order to keep moving forward, right? So it's a lifelong thing. Like there's no one in the world who works who is not impacted by these systems. Um, so it's really important that resume advice teach you that, but a lot of folks don't know those systems, so they can't teach you what they don't know, right? Um, but those systems are more important than who you get to do your resume, more important than whether your LinkedIn profile has a pretty picture at the top. Um, is the most important part because that is how talent gets selected and moved around the organization. And if you're not thinking in terms of those systems and how you can move through them, then you won't be able to move through them. You might get into it. I see people say, "Oh, remove remove certain things from your resume so that certain things won't happen." And I'll just be honest, like the the job application, that is not the final stop. There are many, 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 many more stops along the way. And so you want to be able to put yourself in the best position from the start to be able to move through those steps in the system, as opposed to thinking, as a lot of people tell you, that just getting the interview or just getting the job is the end all be all. It is far from it. You want to position yourself well from the start, and you do that by understanding how those systems work. So that's what I want to talk about today. My cough drop is wearing off. I want to make sure, even as I even as I hop off of this live today, that you all understand, like, um, it is not useful for you to be reliant on half or less than thorough resume advice, right? I know everybody feels like they can advise you. Um, and that's fair. That's the case in a lot of fields. This is not a regulated field. So anyone can say that they are a resume writer, and that's fine. More power to you if you're good at it, right? But I do want you all to just be aware, not all advice is for you. And frankly, I want you to be equipped to be able to delineate the good advice from the bad advice, right? The advice you can use from the advice you should leave. Um, because I have a lot of people always asking me, should I do this? Should I do that? Based on what they've heard. And the majority of the time, I'm like, don't ever do that. No, that's bad advice, or it is not bad advice in your situation. I mean, or it's not good advice in your situation. So always put advice in context. Always talk to someone trusted like myself. Come to these lives. I'm talking about it all the time, not just the resume piece, all of it, the systems, the structures that move your resume along and get it seen by the right people. So, yeah, I'll be back on Monday, next Monday, the 17th. Oh, is it a holiday? Well, I'll probably still be back. And we'll talk more about resumes, job search, how to move through these systems, because that's, like I said, the most important part is being able to move yourself through the systems. Just getting the job, as great as a feeling as that is, I want you to be able to sustain that all through. So I'll see y'all again for Career Catalyst Live on Monday, and Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And all right, have a good night.